She had known for a year before she said anything. That was the part she thought about most, later. Not that it had taken him 3 years to say it, but that it had taken her 1 full year of knowing and then another year of waiting to see if he would say it first, and he hadn't. And so eventually she had said it herself, which was the pattern of most things that got said in her life, and which she had mixed feelings about. She had noticed the road in the fall of the 2nd year. She had been watching Oliver Marsh pass every Tuesday for a full year before that, and her assumption for the full 1st year had been the simple one. The road past her homestead was the road between Harlan's Creek and Millstone Ford, and he traveled that road because that was where he was going. The assumption was not unreasonable. It was a road. People traveled roads because roads went somewhere. Then one Tuesday in November of the 2nd year, she had driven her wagon into Harlan's Creek for supplies, flour, lamp oil, a new axe handle. And on the way back, she had taken the direct road through the Miller Creek Valley because it was drier than the long road after a week of rain, and she had arrived home in less time than she expected and had stood at her gate and done the arithmetic. The direct road was 2 miles shorter. Oliver came from the Millstone Ford direction. If Oliver were coming by the direct road, he would arrive at her homestead from the east, where the Miller Creek crossing was. He arrived from the south. He was coming by the long road, which added 2 miles to his journey, which was 40 minutes of travel, which was 40 minutes he added to his Tuesday every week. She had stood at her gate in November doing this arithmetic, and then had gone inside and put the flour away and hung up the axe handle, and made her supper and thought about what the arithmetic meant. She had thought about it carefully and at length, which was how she thought about most things, and she had arrived at the conclusion that Oliver Marsh took the long road past her homestead on purpose. She had not known what to do with this conclusion. She had sat with it for a year. She had been waiting for him to say something about it first, the same way she had waited for Thomas to say things first. And she had caught herself doing this, caught herself applying the old pattern to a new situation, and had thought about it with some care. The situation was not the same as the Thomas situation. Thomas had not said things first because he did not notice them. Oliver, she was fairly certain, noticed everything he did not say. He was a man whose profession was accurate observation. He was taking the long road because he had noticed something and had chosen not to say it yet, which was a different thing from not noticing. She had decided to wait 1 more year. If he said nothing by October of the 3rd year, she would ask. She was 41 years old and had been waiting for things to be said on their own for too long. And she was not going to wait for the spring to run dry again when she could simply say that it was running low. He had not said anything. And so on a Tuesday in October of the 3rd year, at 2 in the afternoon, with Bay at the trough and Oliver standing beside her and the October light going amber across the plains and the long road stretching south behind him and the direct road 2 miles shorter in a direction neither of them was looking, she asked. Her name was Iris Calloway, and she had been on the homestead alone for 4 years, since her husband Thomas had died of a fever in the summer of 1879 at 43 years old. An age and a manner of death that seemed to belong to someone else's story, the kind of thing that happened to people in the newspapers, not to her husband on a Tuesday in July. She had spent the subsequent 4 years absorbing the fact of it in the incremental way that large facts get absorbed, in sections, a piece at a time, over the ordinary days of running a homestead that did not pause for the absorbing to finish. She had stayed because the homestead was hers, and because going back east would have required becoming again the person she had been before she came west, and that person was someone she had spent 20 years of adult life working past. She was 41 years old and had been a capable person her entire adult life, and had learned that capability was not the same thing as happiness but was the thing you could rely on when happiness was not immediately available. She ran 160 acres, a small cattle operation, 12 head, and a kitchen garden that produced enough to make the difference between adequate and comfortable. And she was consistently adequate to comfortable, which was not nothing. It was something. It was what she had. Thomas had been a good man who was not easy to talk to, which was a combination she had accepted over 16 years of marriage, and which had produced in her, over those same years, a specific habit. She noticed things and did not say them. She noticed when the spring was running low before he did, and waited for him to notice it, which usually took 2 more days. She noticed when the south fence needed work and waited for him to bring it up, which he did when it failed rather than before. She noticed, over the full span of 16 years, a great many things about the homestead and the season and, more quietly, about the marriage itself. Things that would have benefited from being said, but which she had learned not to say because Thomas received information about things he hadn't noticed as criticism of his attention. And the argument that followed the saying was always worse than the unsaid thing. She had loved him. She had loved him genuinely. And the habit she had developed around his specific way of being was not resentment but accommodation. The way you accommodate the shape of a life you have chosen. He had died at 43, which she had not accommodated well at first and had eventually accommodated the way she accommodated most things, by doing the work in front of her. She had been left with the homestead and the operation and the specific inventory of a 41-year-old woman who notices everything and says considerably less than she notices. The homestead was sufficient. She was capable. She had been, for 4 years, capable of most things and quiet about most of them. And she had not asked herself whether this was how she intended to continue until the Tuesday in November of the second year when she came home by the direct road and did the arithmetic about Oliver Marsh and sat with the arithmetic for a year. Oliver Marsh had first ridden past her homestead on a Tuesday 3 years before she said anything. And the first Tuesday had been practical. His usual direct road had washed out in a hard August rain and the long road was the only option. He had arrived at Millstone Ford 40 minutes late and had filed the delay away as a weather incident and had not thought about it further. The following Tuesday the direct road was still muddy and the long road was the sensible alternative. The Tuesday after that the direct road was fine. He had taken the long road anyway, and from this Tuesday forward the pretext had gotten thinner and the practice had continued and he had arrived at a point, somewhere around the 5th or 6th Tuesday, where he stopped needing the pretexts at all. He was a cattle buyer. He traveled between Harlan's Creek and Millstone Ford and the ranches and homesteads in between every week, assessing cattle, making offers, recording prices and weights in the meticulous notebooks he had kept for 12 years of this work. He was 44 years old and had not been married, which was not from any particular decision against it, but from the combination of traveling 6 days a week and a temperament that found it considerably easier to say difficult things about the quality of cattle than about other difficult things. He had cultivated, over years of professional necessity, the habit of accuracy, of saying what he found, in precise terms, without decoration. And this habit had made him excellent at his work and slightly strange in conversation, because most conversations did not particularly want precision. He was aware of this. He had made peace with it. He knew Iris Calloway's name from the county land records, which he kept as part of his meticulous operational notes, because knowing who owned what land in the county was part of how he worked. Iris Calloway. 160 acres, north section, small cattle operation, deed registered under her own name since the spring of 1879. He had noted, because he noted everything, that she was running the operation alone, no hired hands in the county record, no male relative listed in the township census, and he had seen on his Tuesdays that this was accurate. She was competent. She was frequently at work when he passed. She had the particular quality of a person who had figured out how to do most things themselves and had stopped waiting for anyone else to figure it out for them. He found this interesting in a professional sense, and then in another sense that he had taken more time to acknowledge. Every Tuesday for 3 years he rode past, and she was somewhere on the property and they waved, and sometimes he stopped to water Bay at her trough, and sometimes they exchanged a few sentences about the weather and the market and the road. She asked good questions about the market, the kind that showed she understood what the answers meant, which was not always the case in his conversations with ranchers who were considerably more invested than she was. He had been conducting, he understood by the end of the second year, a very slow and insufficiently declared something for 3 years. He had not managed to say anything direct about this, which was a departure from his usual habits, and which he had told himself for another year was because the right moment had not presented itself. By October of the 3rd year he had stopped believing that. The Tuesday in October of the 3rd year started the same way as any other Tuesday. He appeared at the crest of the road at 2 in the afternoon, which was when he always appeared, and she was at the porch railing with her coffee, which was where she had been every Tuesday at 2 for 3 years. They waved. He turned Bay into her yard and stopped at the trough, and she came down from the porch, and they stood at the trough in the October afternoon doing the usual exchange. The road had been dry. The market was moving in the direction she had predicted 2 weeks ago, which she mentioned, and he confirmed, which gave her a specific small satisfaction she had never mentioned. She had asked him, in the middle of the second year, what a fair weight price looked like for a mature steer, and he had told her precisely, because he was precise about everything, and she had used that number to make a good sale the following month. She had not told him this. She had filed it as one of the things she had noticed and not said. She said, "You go past the Miller Creek crossing on your way from Millstone Ford?" He said yes. He crossed there every week. The ford was shallow and the crossing was reliable. She said, "The direct road goes through there." He said yes. She said, "It's 2 miles shorter than the road you take." He said he knew that. She said, "Then why do you take the long road?" She said it the way she said most things, plainly, without softening, as a question that had been waiting for a moment when asking it was the honest thing, and she had decided this was that moment. He looked at her. He was a man who read situations for a living, and what he read in her face was that she already knew the answer and was giving him the opportunity to say it himself, which was a kindness. He said, "I prefer the scenery." She looked at the October Colorado landscape around her homestead, flat and brown and honest, the particular unscenic quality of the high plains in autumn. She said, "The scenery isn't better on this road." He said, "No." A pause. He said, "There's your homestead on this road." He said it plainly, the way he said most things, the way he gave an accurate account of the weight of a good steer. Just the information, offered to a person who could use it. She was not ready for it to be plain. She had expected another deflection, another practical reason, and she had prepared herself for the deflection and had not prepared herself for the plain. She said, "Oliver." He said, "Yes." She said, "I'm going to need a minute." He said, "Take as long as you need. I'm not in any particular hurry." He was in fact 2 miles behind the short road schedule, which was where he had been every Tuesday for 3 years and which had stopped bothering him sometime in the second year. She stood at the porch railing and looked at the road and thought about Thomas and about the habit of noticing things and saying nothing, and about what it had cost her and what it had cost Thomas, and about the specific way she was not going to keep doing it now. She said, "I've been counting the Tuesdays." He said, "For how long?" She said, 2 years. He said, "You noticed after the first year." It was not a question. She said, "Yes." He said, "I was trying to decide when to say something." She said, "You took 3 years." He said, "I know." A pause. "Some things take longer to get to plain than others." She said, "What made today the day?" He looked at her. He said, "You asked." She said, "I asked because you weren't going to say it." He said, "That's accurate." She said, "Were you ever going to say it?" He thought about this honestly. He said, "Yes, eventually." She said, "When?" He said, "I had been thinking about November." She said, "What happens in November?" He said, "The cattle market slows down. I have more time on Tuesdays." She looked at him. She said, "That's a terrible reason." He said, "Yes. But it was the reason I had settled on." She said, "Then it's a good thing I asked in October." He said, "Yes, it is." They stayed on the porch for longer than his schedule allowed. She brought coffee, which she had not done before, and he sat on the porch step and drank it, and they talked. Not about the weather or the market, but about the other things. The things you say when you have stopped using practical things as the whole of the conversation. He asked about the homestead, and she told him things she had not told anyone in 4 years. She asked about the cattle buying, and he told her things that were not the standard answers he kept ready for most people. When he finally got back on Bay, the sun was already lower than it should have been. She said, "The short road is faster from here, if you're behind." He looked at the road past her homestead, the long road, the road that went nowhere he needed to go except past her gate. He said, "I'll take the long road." She said, "I know." He said, "Tuesday." She said, "Tuesday." The Tuesday after October was the first one in which both of them knew what the Tuesday was. It was different, she found, in a way she had not predicted. Not more comfortable, not less, but different. The way a room looks different when you've turned on the lamp after sitting in the near dark for a long time. The same room, more visible. He stopped at the trough. She was at the railing. Bay drank. They had coffee. He told her something about the cattle market that he had been saving since Thursday because it was the kind of thing she would want to know, and he had stopped needing a reason to tell her things she would want to know. She told him about the south pasture drainage problem in more detail than she had told anyone, because she had decided in October that having access to someone who actually knew what the answer meant was not something to use sparingly. He looked at the pasture and said 2 things about the drainage, and both of them were correct. She made a note to herself. He went back on the long road at the usual time, 2 miles past the short road schedule. He was back the following Tuesday at 2 in the afternoon, which was when he always arrived, on the long road at the gate. She was at the porch railing, which was where she always was on Tuesdays at 2. He watered Bay. They had coffee. He was 25 minutes behind the short road schedule when he left, which was better than the previous week and which he had stopped calculating. By December, which was the 4th month since October and the 37th month of Tuesdays, she had stopped noticing the hoofbeats on the long road as a separate event from the afternoon. The hoofbeats were simply what 2 o'clock meant on Tuesdays, the same way the coffee in the morning was what 5 o'clock meant and the accounts by lamplight were what 8 o'clock meant. She had arranged her Tuesday afternoons in a way she had not made a decision about, around the hoofbeats on the long road. She still stood at the porch railing at 2. She had stopped constructing reasons for being there, which was the last thing to go. The last performance of not waiting that she had been giving for a year before October. The habit of the woman who notices things and does not indicate that she notices them. She stood at the porch railing at 2 on Tuesdays because she was waiting for Oliver to come down the long road. And this was what it was, and she had decided to let it be what it was. She thought about Thomas sometimes on the December Tuesdays, in the way you think about a person when you are standing in a place they never stood beside you. Thomas had been reliable about the cattle, the fences, the practical operations of the homestead, the things that needed managing. He had not been reliable about noticing that she was standing somewhere and finding his way to where she was standing. This was not a failing exactly. It was a shape. The shape of their 16 years. She did not resent it. She had simply, in the 4 years since, noticed what a different shape felt like. What a different shape felt like was someone who took the long road on purpose, every Tuesday for 3 years, 2 miles out of his way, because the long road had her homestead on it. What it felt like was someone who kept her cattle market questions in mind from one Tuesday to the next and brought the answers without being asked. What it felt like was a Tuesday afternoon and Bay at the trough and the October light and someone who said the true thing plainly when she finally asked him to. She stood at the railing. She waited for the hoofbeats. They came. Some things you stop needing a reason for when the reason has been true long enough. When the thing you have been almost saying has been said, and the thing you have been almost doing has been done, and what is left is the Tuesday, reliable and specific, and you in it, and him on the road to you.